Hey guys, my name is Wade Klessman, and I will be presenting on the Jimi Hendrix Experience today, and their place in the music world with the hard rock that developed at the end of the 1960s. So at the end of the 1960s, the Vietnam War was still going on. People in America were not supportive of the war whatsoever, and American youth were very angered and outraged that the U.S. was still involved in the war. They began protesting, very much vocalizing their feelings towards the war in public, and angered, they sought out music that reflected these feelings of anger. Fashion of the late 1960s was also changing. Many trends emerged, such as bell-bottom jeans and tie-dye clothing, and it was loose fitting. It broke with traditional fashion ideas that preceded these trends, and they reflected the social movements of the times. Actually, people of the time wanted to break away with the norm, which was the Vietnam War and social injustices. They wanted to be different and protest these and be champions for change. So their desire for change was reflected in the dramatic changes that were occurring in fashion. So the new sound that they were seeking came about as a result of psychedelic rock fusing with an amplified electrified blues, and this new hard rock sound was created. Some referred to this new sound as heavy metal. Now, while it doesn't sound like the metal we think of today, for instance, it was certainly a stepping stone and a building block that needed to happen for hard rock and later versions of metal to occur. The new sound was very different from the acid rock that preceded it in the early 60s. Acid rock was very airy, light, and hopeful sounding, whereas this was angry, desperate, and very loud. Some distinctive characteristics of this new sound include the 12-bar blues structure, just like traditional blues. However, this new sound differed from traditional blues in the sense that it was turned up high volume and it could not be ignored, which is what people felt with their feelings. American youth did not want to be ignored they didn't want to be ignored by the government with regards to how they felt about social injustices of the time. So this music and this high volume reflected that. It was fuzzy, it was menacing, it reflected people's anger, and it featured heavy bass lines, intense drumming, ample use of power chords, guitar solos that were very skillful and loud, and lyrics that were militant and reflected how people felt with regards to, let's say, the Vietnam War. Now, Jimi Hendrix, he grew up poor in Seattle in a broken household, and he is arguably one of the most iconic symbols and figures for the music and this time period in history. He reflected, and through his music, reflected the desperate mood of the times. On the surface, he appeared to reflect hippie ideology with his tie-dye clothing and other utilization of fashion of the time. However, the music he performed was angry and reflected how people felt desperate at the time. He was influenced by blues artists such as Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, among others, and that's where he got his blues sound from. He formed the Jimi Hendrix Experience band with Mitch Mitchell on drums, Noel Redding on bass, and himself playing lead guitar. They began touring in Britain and doing various shows there before gaining popularity and producing their first album to come back to America and become popular there. Now, their music included the electric amplified blues and some psychedelic rock to make that new hard rock sound. They were one of the first to promote this new sound. Mitch Mitchell performed heavy, fast drumming. Noel Redding had amplified, heavy bass lines. And Jimi Hendrix, of course, had his wailing guitar solos. He was a virtuoso on the instrument, utilized many power chords to assault the listener with his sound, and he also utilized new technologies such as fuzz and wah-wah pedals to make his guitar sound like it's crying, and he really created a unique sound for himself. They produced 3 albums, his first being Are You Experienced?, second one being Axe as Bold as Love, and finally Electric Ladyland before disbanding. They also gave live performances such as at Woodstock, which is probably one of their most famous, with Jimi Hendrix giving his powerful rendition of the national anthem there. So in summary, the hard rock at the end of the 1960s combined electric blues and psychedelic rock and turned up the volume to create a totally new sound that reflected the anger that was felt by many American youths at the time. And the Jimi Hendrix Experience were one of the groups to pioneer this sound. They played that hard rock that featured Jimi Hendrix's famous soloing talent, and it accurately reflected how people felt at the time and allowed them to express their feeling of anger through listening to this music.